sustain it. So I think that if we look at the themes of the last decades and how that's affected growth around the world, one of the major themes was the WTO in China, which started really in earnest in 1997 and then came to fruition in about 2000, which led to a huge infrastructure, huge export growth in China, opened China's markets to the world. So that was the second wave. The first wave was then after the Cultural Revolution and allowing for more competition and growth in China. And the second wave was really the World Trade Organization, which allowed China to export dramatically to the world, which created huge infrastructure projects, and using the rewards of that export-led product base to grow the infrastructure and grow the state-owned enterprises and the growth of SMEs, small and medium growth companies dramatically. But all of this export-based China is slowing down at this moment as wages have increased. And if you're just efficiency enhancing, in other words, I can produce something at lower cost than competitors can, there's always a lower cost competitor in the world. So a lot of production, as wages have gone up, are moving to Vietnam or Indonesia or Egypt or Mexico and the like. So China has to find its third wave, okay, to create the next wave of growth in China. And obviously, in my view, that's a combination of two things. One is the huge population, and as I said, is more and more people are empowered from the countryside to move into the cities. We have a vast marketplace to address, so huge economies of scope and scale that is really not true in other parts of the world. And second wave that I see is the competition for increasing the high-tech or high-technological parts of the Chinese economy in competition with that of the US. So I think in the other theme of the last decade has been the US after the 9/11 World Trade Center bombing. We went into war. We had fiscal and monetary stimulus as well. We had a lot of excesses in the economy, a lot of easy money, which caused people to think that the economy was very stable when it wasn't, and there was a lot of borrowing on housing. And a lot of the GDP growth was sort of false growth through the war and false growth through the ability to stimulate the housing construction market through the credit that was afforded from the easy money policies of the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States. So that is obviously ending. Our wars, I hope, are now being less, and at the same time, we've completely moved away from, given the crash in the housing market, from that type of thinking. And the euro had created was a huge boom in Europe because of the joining of the euro, building the euro in 1997 or 6. Then what happened after that was that there was a huge consumption and borrowing boom in the periphery of Europe. It's very funny. I was in Spain last year, and the Spanish people have the most beautiful roads. I mean, they're incredible. And they have high-speed trains, which go between Madrid and Barcelona and Seville. There's an unbelievable number of high-speed trains. And they have, in addition to that, the office buildings are incredible, beautiful. The post office is magnificent. Magnificent, okay? But they only have 60 million people. And they have all this infrastructure they built, because Germany lent them all the money, the German banks. So it's not bad when you can borrow very inexpensively and people give you credit, and it's very hard to take those things away. So these themes, now there's a great struggle in Europe between the countries that are in huge debt and the countries that have surplus, such as Germany, and we will see whether the next issues recur and happen in France as well. So all these themes will slow and reverse in the next decade. So I think the themes of this decade are three themes that I see, and one of them is the US will grow decade in hypothesis. And what we are doing in the US is insourcing. we're moving manufacturing back to the US. We have a great growth in manufacturing in the United States because our technology is making us competitive, from robotics to computing to 3D printing, which is idiosyncratic layering of printing to make prototypes and to make idiosyncratic production. We're even going to have self-driving cars. I can see in 10 years where we have fleets of trucks going over the highways in the United States, no driver, and essentially one truck deviating from the road and going off into a city and then hooking up with another convoy 2 days later. The interesting part about economics, okay, is that we have, if you can do something faster, you can do something more idiosyncratic, and you can do things more flexibly under uncertainty. The greater the uncertainty, the more flexibility you want. The greater individual needs are, the more idiosyncratic you want to make it, and people want things faster. You know, when you used to transact, now you can use your cell phone to make transactions. You know, when I first started trading stock, I had to phone my broker, get a quote from my broker. He'd say, I'll see what I can do about executing it. And then he phoned me back 2 days later, you know, and told me what happened. Now, you might laugh at that. So well, it's just the idea of making things faster. My family started off in Canada in the department store business. And at the time we sold shoes to miners, and they were only one size, medium. So if you were a big-footed miner, you had to stuff your foot in the boot. If you're a small-footed miner, you had to put stuffing in the boot. And so they innovated. They went to the manufacturer and said, can we have 3 sizes of boots? Large, medium, and small. And they sold boots all over that part of the country. So idiosyncratic, okay, production. And now we have with Nike that you can buy shoes if you want. Kids can buy shoes. They can print in 3D. On the one foot, you can have orange. The other foot, you can have red, you know, or pink or whatever. You can have embroidering, idiosyncratic. And that's what everyone wants. They want individualization. China has mass production. That's outsourcing, and large things like cement or steel or those types of things. Obviously, that has a huge market is standardized products. Okay? At the same time, the US has been moving a lot in manufacturing to idiosyncratic. So the 3D printing, for example, allows you to do things in your way of doing things, so you can have parts, small parts for medical things, such as your own valves, your own hips, your own replacement parts, as well as aircraft and the like. And so we're moving about 20% of the production is to actually individualize printing in 3 dimensions by using adaptive layering. And also, in the United States, we also have energy. We are fortunate to have water and gas and shale now for a while. But more important than that is we are moving tremendously fast towards microgrids, which allow for idiosyncratic use of electricity and power. One of the things that you should know is that the power system of the grid, the national grid, fails quite a lot. So when there's a storm in New Jersey, for example, up the coast of New Jersey, it takes the power out on the East Coast. Or in California, we have storms that takes the power out. So a lot of firms are building their own power facilities or microgrids so that they can have backup power, because actually the cost associated with power failure is about 3/4 of the cost of energy itself. And so to protect yourself, make it more idiosyncratic, make it more individualized to have the power you want, whether it's solar, methane, gas, electricity, and using pricing to actually change the location. And also, too, we have now moving to sensors. There's sensors everywhere, increasing, where sensors are checking whether your car is inefficient or efficiently using power, whether you've left your house and no one's in the house, so it turns the power down. You know, and the washing machines and everything, it's all changing so that it makes things idiosyncratic to you and faster to make adjustments. And so those are two, a combination of our people, locations, people, technology, and energy are three important feedback systems, either positive or negative, which change the growth of the economies. And I think that that means that our amount of money that we have for imports will fall, which makes the amount of dollars circulating around the world to fall, which then leads a place for another currency for trade, which is the internationalization of the RMB, and as another great movement of the next 10 years, and seeing how the financial markets of China open up, and as a result of opening up, allowing the RMB to be the current currency, another currency of exchange, and that'll occur for trade, investment, and at the same time, in the future, hope being able to actually transact in RMB or to buy financial assets and instruments in RMB. And unlike in China is now establishing its own International Monetary Fund and its own World Bank in competition with the West's World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. So this growth. All these three themes that I have means that the economies will grow and will change the whole nature of the way we think about things going forward. Just to give you one example of how, in my area, which is Silicon Valley in California, that it used to be the case to start a new business, maybe $1.5 million for US for a venture capital firm. And most of that money was based on the idea you needed servers, you needed technicians to set up your own computing facilities. And now the price has fallen to $100,000, $150,000 for it to start a business. Why? Because you can have the cloud, you can go to Amazon or Google, and you can actually have cloud computing. So everything, and why do you need this? The more uncertainty you have, this is the wonderful part about economics. You have to think about this because in your thinking is, when I say about flexibility or uncertainty and how you handle uncertainty has a huge effect on investment. Not only investment now, but investment in the future. Finding out ways to make things more idiosyncratic. Thinking about ways to make things more flexible and faster to do things. And so it means that we don't have a static economy around the world. Things change. And the change is based on efficiently doing these things more quickly and doing them in ways that are increasing the flexibility we have. And it's really exciting to see how firms are struck. In the Coase theorem about you say, let's organize ourselves in larger entities. That was his model initially when he built his model in the 60s. But now it's the reverse. With what we're doing now is what's the most efficient way to organize ourselves. And so corporations are breaking down into smaller components. And the large public utilities in the United States are being completely disintermediated by these microgrids. And so when you're thinking about employment or what you want to do in the future, the whole world is open. And that's what makes it so interesting to think about the things, what I can do to actually add value. So I think that this is a huge value for the United States. And come to the United States, you'll have wonderful opportunities. Don't come to California, though. We're too crowded. Go to Iowa. Anyway, no, so it's a bottoms-up view of growth. And so we have, on the one hand, we have the political mess, which is overhanging things. And on the other hand, we have this great growth in technology and innovation and energy and the like. So now I'll go back for a second to think about the second school of thought and do it quickly in the time that I have left. But we have the idea we have debt deflation. There's a debt overhang in the West, and Japan has lots of debt and as well, and it'll take years to come back to have the growth rates we have. Or what's the next great growth activities going forward. So debt, and that's an interesting question, because if we're going to employ people in the future, what are we going to employ them in and doing, and how are we going to be productive? And I think a lot of it is getting used to the idea with automation and change that there's, until we have the next new things, that there's going to be a lot of service jobs. We're going to change the nature of our way in which we do things, and we have to become used to this change and what it implies going forward. So the debt in the public sector has increased dramatically, and we also have huge state and local debt in the United States, with pension promises that have been made, with health care promises that have been made to former workers, which are causing there to be large deficits with regard to unfunded or funded benefits. And also, we still have continued outsourcing from Europe and the United States for homogenized products to emerging markets, and the producing there is with stable production goods. And again, what is the effects on automation and insourcing on job displacement? This is a political issue, and what are we going to do? How is distance learning going to enable us to efficiently redeploy people and re-educate them and have them more connected? Because everyone has to worry about, can a robot replace what I do? And we're seeing robots eating out everything, and computing eating out everything, because they can do it. A robot works 24 hours a day and doesn't seem to have to go to the bathroom. So it has a huge effect. Even my field, which is education, a lot of people feel threatened. Teachers feel threatened. Why do they feel threatened? Because with distance learning, it's not, I was a professor and a teacher, right? That's how I professed and I taught. But the question is, my students are supposed to learn. So what's the new organizational way to make that idiosyncratic, to make it faster, to make it efficient and flexible in how we teach? And that is another growth area. But the old way is disappearing, and the new way is coming. So how we affect our human capital is going to be very interesting going forward. And then we have to ask, what are the effects of the financial crisis on our politics going forward? Right now, we have the BRIC economies are suffering. That's the Brazil, Russia, India in particular, and China. Could be tariff wars, between China, Japan, South Korea at loggerheads right now. And we see structural weaknesses in the economy. We have these monopoly businesses in Italy and in France and in China and the US, and there's no growth in those businesses. Some of these state-owned enterprises are not growing at all, for example, in China. And we have to figure out ways to aerate them, to make them competitive so that they're not draining so much of our capital from society. And obviously, in the United States, because of the aftermath of the crisis, and around the world, in Europe, we're putting huge constraints on our financial institutions, new rules, new regulations, and penalties have been large. I mean, the penalties you read about in terms of JP Morgan was just charged $13 billion of capital because of things they had suffered because of mortgage losses for the Countrywide, who they had acquired under the auspices of the government in 2008. So this idea to penalize retribution is hurting the financial industry, maybe rightly so, but the consequences of that are that we need a new restructuring of the financial system and making it again maybe in a whole new way, but we'll see what happens. In the meantime, this creates noise and uncertainty and reduces lending in the economy. And lending in the economy is really the grease of what makes things go. In China, the state-owned enterprises have all the financing they want through the banks and the government interaction, but it's the small, medium enterprises, which are the growth of China, the ones that are going to really grow China. They are starved for capital. They can only use internally generated funds, really, to grow when they should be able to have access to bank capital and the like. So the idea of hurting the financial system is not the efficient way to really make the country grow. And so in the United States, we're also having a huge redistribution theme. The wealthy had made money back through the financial assets increasing in value dramatically. The poor, on the other hand, have not participated in this growth. So we're having redistribution or taxes and trying to figure out programs to bring back those individuals into society's mainstream, which will be difficult because I said automation, where's the jobs? The seed corps is being eaten away. In addition to that, a lot of our money is being spent in ways that are not encouraging those activities. So the government creates noise, and as it increases uncertainty, the need for risk capital increases at firms, and that means they need to have higher rates of return to support the capital they need to handle the uncertainty. And the projects under uncertainty, more uncertainty, the shorter the project lengths, which is hurting longer-term